welcome to Affinity Talks Gospel podcast. My name is Graham Nicholls from Affinity, and today I'm joined by Jim Sayers, who has various roles, but they include being one of the trustees and pioneers, really, of Praise Trust. So, welcome, Jim.
Lovely. Good to meet you, Graham.
Yeah,
As
thanks.
ever,
Thanks for
after all these
being.
years. Yeah,
Yes, thanks for being with us.
we go back a
So,
long
tell
way.
us about your two main jobs in your sort of Christian ministry life.
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm a pastor.
Mm.
I'm pastor of Grace Church Didcot, one of the elders, and we're a church plant, so we are still smallish, about 40 people, meeting in a community centre. That lots of things that you take for granted in an established church with a building and infrastructure and traditions, it's just not there in a church plant, which can be a great blessing. Um, but at the other end, it can be a great anxiety that this whole thing can fall apart. So, yeah, we're still quite young and fragile, rejoicing in what God is doing, seeing a number of people saved, which is fantastic, which is amazing. And I think that changes the dynamic of everything. When a family has a new baby, the smallest, youngest person changes everything, and young Christians shape and define what the rest of the church is like. So that's my main job.
You find yourself, you come to your second job in just a sec, but quick question on the church plant. Do you find that church plants or small churches tend to try and be small versions of big churches, or have you been able to sort of break out from that and say, we're a bunch of Christians who gather together and we can do what we like within
Yeah,
biblical
I know what you
parameters?
mean. That we never had this big launch.
Yes.
We never went for this big, all balloons and strobes and laser lights launch show, whatever that is. We went for a sort of quiet, incremental launch, and I think that meant that we grew organically. We started from 11 of us, um, and we added layers as we were able to. And I mean, even now there are lots of layers we'd love to add. We'd love to have midweek children's clubs and a youth group and so on.
Mm.
We've just got a junior church. That's our children's work. We put on one-off holiday club for a day when we can. So we're doing what we can when we can. And it is very important not to try and pretend to be the big city church.
Mm.
Actually, I think some people are attracted to a smaller church.
Yeah, definitely.
I
Yeah.
think I think they like being friends.
Mm.
They like actually sitting next to someone in church who they know. They've actually
Yes.
spoken to them before. Um, the old proverbial story of the 800 member church, and somebody sort of turns to speak to the stranger and discovers that they've been an elder of the church for 20 years, sort of thing.
Indeed, yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
there
interesting.
are
So,
advantages. Yeah.
tell us about your other job.
So my other job is voluntary. I'm chairman of trustees of Praise Trust, and I've been doing that since about the same time, really. I mean, I became chairman of Praise Trust about the time we started Grace Church in 2018. So um, uh, we've been doing both things through a pandemic and out the other side, which has been interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I remember that you were brought up in a strict Baptist, gospel standard, strict Baptist background. Because we're going to talk mainly about singing sung praise in the gathered church. What was your experience growing up of that?
Well, I suppose in the household I grew up in, it was most of the music that we heard
Yeah,
was hymns.
right.
We had a pedal harmonium. I was the only one of the family that never played it, and I'm one of 8 children. So we sort of gathered round that to sing. We had piles of hymn books to hand out at home. Having a hymn book at home was kind of normal, and I.
Right.
I think that might be coming back actually, that people are using, having a hymn book to use devotionally,
Yes.
and sing at home is, I think that's a great thing. So as soon as my voice broke, I was going down to alto and then tenor and eventually bass. So I learnt 4-part harmonies as a teenager. Um, when
So
Christmas
although,
comes, when Christmas
yes.
comes and we sing carols, I can just swing into any bass line of any carol that you like, and I absolutely love the bass line at
Mm.
Christmas. So
So although it was, I mean, gospel standard are sort of known for being quite dour and
hmm
theologically with some things that are not
some issues,
necessarily
yeah,
not
yeah.
necessarily helpful, but it sounds as though it was quite a sort of pious joyful thing with singing hymns at home, or was it a very somber thing?
We didn't sing them in a somber way. I
Yeah.
think we all had a, desire to sing joyfully and to sing. We were
Yes.
brought up to sing.
Mm,
And I think it's really important to teach your children to sing.
mm,
I think it goes on from generation to generation. Um, we've just had a family gathering where we all were belting out "Tell Out My Soul." So we are quite a mixed range of churchmanships now as a
yeah.
family, and but we've kept the tradition of singing four-part harmonies. We were singing "Over a Thousand Tongues to Sing," and this lovely bass line was coming out on
Mm,
line three. It's just or line four, and
yeah.
it's great to hear people singing the parts. Yeah, something I've done from childhood, and I love doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously with your role in Praise Trust, which well, historically at least was a physical book, but is an online set of hymns and music and resources, background of hymns and
Growing
so
all the
on.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, and a helpful scriptural index and thematic index as well. Uh, praise.org.
Praise.org.uk.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
a very powerful search engine. Yeah.
It does. It's good.
Mm.
So, with that in mind, have you got any kind of reflections on what people are singing and how people are singing in the contemporary church, which I know is really difficult to to sort of.
Yeah.
So, if we narrow it a little bit to the kind of network of churches that Affinity are involved with, which do range, to be fair, from some psalm only singing, but it's mostly, even amongst the Presbyterians, kind of hymns plus quite a few contemporary songs, through to the FIESA churches, the Grace Baptist churches. What do you think about what people are singing? What's your reflections on what and how we're singing?
It's very hard to know exactly because, of course, for us as a trust, we only get royalties from CCLI for those items of our collection that are being
Mm,
sung,
yeah,
where we own the rights.
yeah,
People may be singing a great deal of our collection we don't own the rights to. We're just
mm,
publishing somebody else's material, so we have no idea how many of those are being sung. We
right,
have got web analytics on our new website, and we're going to study those in some detail in the coming months, just
yeah,
to sort of to get a sense of where we're being used and how it's all going. Um, it's hard to assess really because you know feedback from those that are actually using you is really hard, isn't it?
mm,
Um, I think probably our more contemporary catalogue, that the material that we've published
mm,
online, long after the book was published,
mm,
um, is the bulk of what's being sung, would be my
mm,
guess.
yes,
But I would say that people still come to us for the great traditional hymns as well.
mm,
And the Wesleys and the Wattses and the Newtons are still out there and filling their role and being rediscovered. There's a little bit of a renaissance of singing old hymns but marrying them up with new tunes. And I think that's great. I think we should be giving them a new life. And it's something we want to go through our catalogue and say, well, which which hymns and songs and psalms are suffering from a bad marriage to a tune that no one will sing? And can
yes.
we remarry them to a different tune? Yeah, it's the only context in which I would probably use the word remarry, but there you go.
Yeah. Do you have a view, just to encourage you, after a conversation you and I had a few weeks ago, we did actually sing Lo He Comes with Clouds Descending on
There
that
you go.
weekend, because we're doing a topic on last things,
Yeah.
which is a great hymn. It's probably got about
Yes.
300 verses in the original, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. They
uh,
weren't squeamish about writing 10 verses, were they?
no,
So,
indeed.
yeah.
But yeah, there's great theology. But to be fair, after a sort of period in the, I don't know, 70s, 80s, where songs were a bit lighter on theology. There's not a
Hmm.
complete absence of theology in songs from the last 20 years, probably contemporary songs.
Hmm.
It may
Well,
be a
it's
little bit,
interesting. There are so many different moods, aren't there?
yes,
So when I first met you on a youth hosteling holiday,
yeah,
and we were singing choruses doing the washing up, this was an eye opener to me.
yes,
And then I went off to university and discovered Mission Praise.
Yes.
And that was the backbone of what everybody was singing, wasn't it, really? Um, Now, has to be said, there's a lot of triumphalism in that sort of period.
Yeah.
Into our hands he will give the ground we claim, sort of stuff.
Yes.
That sort of March for Jesus era was very, very optimistic.
Mm.
Lots of hymns about mission, going out to conquer the world, and so on. And then something sort of changed in the 90s and the noughties. I think we got a little bit more introspective. I would say that there are some great short songs from that era that have got lost. And whatever
Yeah.
happened to the one verse chorus? Yeah,
Yes.
I think they were a great asset and a
Yeah.
bit undersold, really. But then, of course, the Townend Revolution came along,
Yes.
where he was writing effectively, is it a song? Is it a hymn? Um, Loaded with truth.
Mm.
And I think they became much, much richer. I suppose the disappointment for us was we'd already published our book and we'd only got three of his songs into it. So,
Yeah.
and then they all started changing the whole church music scene completely.
Mm.
And then the Gettys came along and started working with him, and Sovereign Grace started getting discovered over here. Now, I think that's a great enrichment of what we sing. There's a much clearer understanding of God. There is a much clearer understanding of the whole person and work of Christ. Um, the songs on the Holy Spirit were no longer controversial in a way that they
Mhm.
were in the 1980s,
Mhm.
and that's not to say that we disapprove of Graham Kendrick. We love Graham Kendrick's songs, and I think you follow his development through
Mm.
all the decades that he's been writing, and you can see trends in what's being sung. And then along came the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I think that changed a lot. It made us think about why we want to sing because we couldn't.
Mm.
And I think it also made people discover lament. It's almost
Yeah.
like we had been afraid of lament. And had we got letterboxed a bit, we wanted to avoid the high exaltation sort of phase, and we wanted to just avoid the darker colours.
Hmm.
Whereas I think if you go to
Yeah.
the Psalms have got all the full spectrum of emotion, haven't they? And huge exaltation and deep lament. So I think lament has become a little bit more acceptable. We can be
Yes.
honest about our emotions now. I think that's
Yeah.
certainly true. Yeah.
Yeah. Take us through the sort of process. So if we go from, first of all, just where are we finding our hymns, and then we'll talk
Mm.
about which ones to choose, because I know you have some thoughts about that,
Okay.
how you choose. But just in terms of source, obviously one could use praise.org.uk,
Mm.
but
Please.
more broadly, because it's a funny thing in the modern world where I guess historically you sung the hymns that were in the hymn book, and you may not know a few, but there was music for them, and you could learn them, or you might go to another church and hear one, and then think, oh,
Mm.
we can sing this. But nowadays, it's kind of what you hear on conferences, what you see online, and things kind of have. It's almost like a fashion industry
Mm.
where, but for reasonable reasons, City of Light become popular, they get noticed. We sing them. We notice them at conferences. We sing a few
Mm.
more. They write a few more. We sing a few more. So it's a funny process about how you select. Do you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why City Light suddenly became popular.
Yes.
First of all, they're
Yeah.
working hard at their theology, and they're
Yeah.
coming out of a church, St Paul's, North Sydney, with a long evangelical tradition, well taught, and so
Yeah.
that shines in what they're writing. That's a great strength of a lot of City Light's material. The other thing is they discovered what Stuart Townend and Keith Getty discovered, which is if you set your tunes to the pentatonic scale,
Yeah.
so in Christ alone, da dum da da da
Yeah.
dum da da, we know where it's going, and
Yes.
it's sticking to a very predictable range of notes. The feet land where you expect them to, and that's
Yeah.
true with City of Light as well. They are therefore very congregational, and
Yes.
I say hooray for that because um, truth is, with a lot of contemporary songs, if you actually took out the drums and the bass and just listened to the melody, it's
Mm.
pretty much just a blip along a line. They're
Yeah.
singing two or three notes. What Getty and Townend and Sovereign Grace and City Light and Co have done for us is give us melody back, which has
Right.
been great, and
Right.
therefore it sticks in the mind. If I go on holiday to a church and they're singing something I don't know, the truth is sometimes it will be utterly forgettable. And I think that's a pity because the great thing about anything that we sing is that the tune is going to anchor the words in our soul, and we're going
Yes.
to carry on singing it through the week. If I come away from a Sunday service where I couldn't really pick up the tune because there's so much noise in the background,
Hmm.
and there wasn't much tune to pick up, it's instantly forgettable. Actually,
Hmm.
take all the backing away, and it's a bit like medieval plain song.
Yes.
And you're just going da 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 da, and you're just not really putting a much melody in there. So that's
No.
one of my hobby horses, that we need
So
to combine
yeah.
great words with a great tune for it to stick in our minds. Mm.
So in terms of sources, do you think a kind of an aggregator like Praise or a hymn book, which is another
Yeah,
form of aggregation,
yeah.
is better than just kind of bending with the wind as to what you happen to experience?
Yeah, I think it's very good for every church to think hard about what it sings
Yes.
and to say, right, we're going to build up a body of what we know.
Hmm.
It's very important. I'm often accused in our church of, because quite a lot of people are new, I'm
Yes.
accused of throwing songs into Sunday that nobody knows and we
Yeah.
struggle to sing.
Yeah.
And I guess we all have Sundays like that where we have one too many that we don't know.
Mm.
Um, at the same time, you don't want to do the same song 4 weeks running and kill
No.
it, by
No.
over familiarity. So you've got to strike a balance. But I think it's very important that the gatekeepers, that the worship leaders, the pastors, whoever's leading worship, thinks very hard about building up what a church knows and learning stuff regularly,
Yes.
so that we are growing what we know,
Yes.
and that you have some categories for choosing.
Right.
So, for example, is it theologically sound?
Hmm.
Are the phrases that are used biblical? Now,
Hmm.
let's be honest. You can go back to the 19th century and
Hmm.
look at the hymns that were written in the sort of romantic Victorian era, and frankly, there's just a whole load of poetic license going on there. It's got no biblical basis.
Yes.
Fair flowers of paradise extend their fragrance ever sweet. I mean, where does that come from in scripture? I know it's heresy to criticize big Victorian favorites, but so we need to think hard about, are we singing something that's biblical, or just because it's sort of got a lot of psychological heft to it,
Mm. Mm.
and it sort of punches us hard and we think, yeah, sort of thing. You've got to work out, is this glorifying to God? Is this edifying? Part of the task of singing to one another is that the word of Christ dwells in us richly and we
Mm.
edify one another as we sing. Um, you also want to think, when you're choosing for a Sunday service, how does this fit the theme of the service?
Sure.
If I'm preaching on Psalm 42, here's a thing that often happens in a church. You go to a church and someone's preaching on one of the Psalms. They never actually sing the Psalm they've just preached,
Yes.
or a version of it.
Yeah.
So are you fitting the mood of the preaching, or is the worship, the rest of the worship, saying one thing,
Hmm.
and the ministry, the preaching, saying something else? So
Yes.
you've got to make sure that the whole thing fits together. Um, I would also say, because of what you've talked about in terms of celebrity culture, the
Yeah.
celebritization of songwriting, we have a limited number of very, very well-known songwriters, singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
And thanks to YouTube and Spotify and so on, everybody's listening to them.
Yeah.
Nobody will discover the guy from Lancashire who's sitting in his at his desk at home and writing a brilliant hymn.
Yeah.
But nobody's discovered it because it's, he never leads worship at Keswick, or he never leads worship at one of the big conferences in America. So
Mm.
so we've got that issue. How do we find quality songs written by people nobody's heard of? Um,
Yeah.
and that's actually one of the reasons why Praise exists. We want to publish good Christian writing, especially from here in Britain.
Yeah.
to give people a platform to be found, because we think that we've looked at their song, and we've given it thorough scrutiny in terms of the tune and in terms of the words, and we think this deserves a wider audience.
Mm.
So we're
Just,
trying
just
to find the best.
just coming back to the choosing, you could have a song that was theologically accurate in every line,
Yeah,
but there was no beauty to it in that
yeah,
it was just a series of propositions.
yeah,
I think even some contemporary songs that are theologically okay, just every now and then you feel like this is not poetically
yeah.
very beautiful or coherent.
Yes,
Is that
it's
another
not going to
criteria?
last. It's not going to last the test of time, is it? Because
Yes,
you've got to have a foot in. You've got to have 3 feet on this tripod. One
yes,
foot in scripture, one
yes,
foot in the culture
yeah,
that people are living in, and
mm,
their normal musical culture,
yeah,
and one foot in the requirements of music and meter and rhyme poetry. So. Um, there are some great town end lines that I absolutely love. From life's first cry to final breath. That's
yes,
that's a great that's a great phrase, isn't it? Jesus
yes,
commands my destiny,
yes,
and I'm sure that required a lot of redrafting and a lot of reworking before he landed on it.
yes.
Um, I mean, I might be wrong, but uh,
Well, yes, it's better than from the beginning of life to the end of life,
absolutely,
because
yeah.
it's poetry.
It's
Um,
poetry, and we need to recognize that.
yeah,
And there are great lines from Charles Wesley. Our God contracted to a span, incomprehensibly made man.
yes,
Wow, love to have written that.
yes,
Um, so there are all those sorts of aspects of the process that have got to be considered. So we do reject some things because they're just poetically bland. You
right,
know,
yes,
you're just left. We separate out the words and the music in our editorial process
right,
because we want the musicians to say, can this be played by the average church musician?
hmm
But we want to look hard at the words, and we have a list of 9 tests. Don't ask me to recite all of them off the top of my head. But is it theologically sound? Is it biblical, or is it contradicting something that's said in Scripture? Um, you know, does it move us, or is it dull? And some things are just dull, and some things are very twee.
yes,
You just archaic sayings that people still seem to write in 21st century hymns. So you've got all of those considerations that are part of our editorial process. And I
yeah,
think that's very important because when people come to our website, they expect to find quality. If you like, we've been a filter to serve churches, and they can know that if we publish something, we believe that it is sound, it is strong enough to be published. Um, they may not know it because it's new to them, but that's why we want it published and we want people to discover it. And we've probably,
yeah. I had a question about the not the modernization in terms of music, but in terms of words, because obviously
yeah,
Praise took a view on that. You did a few things with "And Can It Be," which
yes.
some people may like, and some people like myself might not like. But
Hmm.
I also I'm a kind of a hypocrite because, or at least I'm inconsistent because I virtually never sing "Be Thou My Vision." I sing "Lord, Be My Vision,"
Well, thank you very much. There
um,
you go.
because
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
Lord
we
Be,
did a good job on some, and we
yes,
didn't do such a good job on others.
yeah.
And I
But
think you just have to take each one on its merits.
well,
So,
indeed, yeah.
I think the big 4 carols, Come All Ye Faithful, Hark the Herald, A Little Town, and Once in Royal, it's very hard to change those
Yes,
without upsetting everybody. And nobody says that you've got to use our version.
no, indeed,
You can still go back to an old hymn book and find the old words. Nobody
yeah,
complains about that. We're giving you the option of
yes,
singing revised words. Now, it's something. I mean, the case for it is simple, really. We expect our Bible to be intelligible to the people who
yes,
read it, and you can have an
yes,
argument about which Bible version, but our Bibles are in English, and a great deal of energy has been put in our lifetimes into translating the Bible into contemporary English. Um, More and more important as people from an unchurched background and many different nations come to
mm,
to read the Bible. Therefore, it's very important that people understand what they are singing.
Mm.
and that they identify with that. I think that's
Yeah.
very
And
important.
the reason I'm a little bit hesitant about Be Thou My Vision, for example, is I feel like it's been picked up in sort of contemporary circles, but it feels like there's a slight disconnect that people are singing it more for its kind of stylistic antique value
Yeah.
rather than because we can really enter into the words. Because, Be Thou as a sort of as a request is quite unusual language for my 10-year-old grandchild to be singing. So they're only ever going to kind of learn it as a word phrase, not really as something that's a heart thing, if you know what I mean. So that's
There
why,
was another issue with that hymn,
yeah,
which was that the original hymn didn't fit the tune.
no, indeed.
And so our revised version went out of its way to make sure every line had the same number of syllables and we knew where we were going. So we felt
I'm
we
with you.
helped it, you know.
Some people have chosen it at weddings that I've conducted, and the "Be Thou My Vote," and you're always kind of think this is going to go wrong
Yeah,
because the lines don't scan.
yeah,
Particularly people at a wedding are not going to know where to go.
yeah, yeah. And we
Um,
actually we had it at my son's wedding, but they went and looked at the praise version and added in some words that were missing and,
yeah,
did a bit of a hybrid. So, which is fine because there's,
yeah.
it's I don't think we've copyrighted that. So, yeah.
A, a question for you mentioned about you kind of where you're choosing from, the criteria that you use, but also that the gatekeepers should be using, and then the service leaders or preachers, whoever's choosing, in terms of fitting the scripture you're preaching from, fitting the pattern of the service and so on. What do you think about the fact that people who are unchurched probably don't have a view on whether it should be contemporary or traditional, strangely enough.
Mm.
And is traditional or contemporary more attractive to the outsider?
It's a very difficult one to know that, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
the so-called quiet revival, whatever we make of it, is very interesting in that some people, some young men particularly, are
Mm.
looking for that which is traditional and
Yeah.
authentic,
Yeah.
and that they might just as easily be drawn to Eastern Orthodox worship
Mm.
because it feels spiritual.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's something that we should pay attention to. Um, the point is that when they have really arrived spiritually, when they are born again, when they are hungry for the word, then I think it's understanding and clarity and mission that become important to them. And there's no doubt that if you are trying to reach working class people in Britain,
Mm.
you've got to work hard at the language that you use in worship.
Yes.
And I think maybe traditional language is a bit of a middle class affectation.
Yeah.
I think if we have a number of people in our church who are from a background of addiction,
Yeah.
for whom singing in church is a challenge. They've got to learn
Mm.
to sing for the first time in their life. They only
Mm.
sing in the shower, sort of thing.
Mm.
And they don't want anybody else to hear them sing. They're quite shy. So
Mm.
to put up an extra barrier that they've then got to learn all this other language with, Elizabethan suffixes and all the rest of it. Um, is asking an enormous amount of such people.
Mm.
And I think that the really important thing is that when they get it, when they get the gospel, they really get it, and it
Mm.
goes deep into their soul. And they are quite matter of fact and down to earth. So I do think that for such people, contemporary English is very, very important.
Yeah.
Um, Now,
In
it
terms
does
of
have to be said, we have this reputation for having
yes.
revised all these hymns. We've got a catalogue of 1,400 items.
Yes.
Less than 400 of them are revised hymns.
Yes.
So, which
Yeah.
surprises a lot of people. And I do wonder how many of those are still being sung. So,
Yeah.
we maybe shouldn't overblow it.
No, I think the style as well as wording. I mean, this might be a terrible thing to say, but we probably take in our church a kind of Radio 2 approach,
Yeah.
which would be we're not trying to be leading edge. We're not trying to get you to really notice, the guitar solos or the fact that we've introduced rap or something. So we're not trying to be that kind of
Mm.
innovative, but we're also not trying to make you feel like you're going back in time. So now that can be good. It can be a little bit bland because Radio 2 has the benefit that it appeals to a much wider age range, Radio 2. But it also can be a little bit bland. So there's a danger in that. But does that make any sense to you as a sort of,
Yeah, yeah. So I think
it's
I
not a
know what
very
you mean.
spiritual criteria.
Well, let's try and express it differently.
Yeah.
We want to be singing things that people of all age groups will identify with.
Yeah.
We want to be singing a mix of genres.
Yes.
We want to be enriched by the great classics of the past. We want to sing Holy, Holy, Holy Lord God Almighty,
Yeah.
and Psalm 23 in the traditional version,
Yeah.
and so on. But we also want to be singing, you know, the most, the newest things that are coming out of Boswell and Papa and Co. in America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we want to be singing what Joyful Noise are singing, producing and publishing here in Britain, and so on. So we
Mm.
want to be doing all of those things. Um, but I do think it's important that churches have some sort of middle ground that
Mm.
everybody's happy on.
Yes.
Because if you're all the time leaning in one direction or all the time leaning in the other, you've got difficulties.
Mm.
And so you have to think about that every week. I mean, I write a Word document of what we sing every week, so I've got the whole year to look at, and I can go
Mm.
back and see when we sung something before. I'm not particularly a spreadsheet person, and so I'm always looking back to see what we sung and to see how
Yes.
we got the mix right. Um, and I don't think we always get it right, and I think certain trends appear and certain
Mm.
things get forgotten that were great songs, you know.
Yeah, we have the same issue. We have a big spreadsheet, and sometimes you get to the end of the year and realize you haven't sung what was a new song you introduced that was good that you
Yeah,
then forgot.
yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, we sung one recently, Two Sins Have We Committed,
yes,
because I was dealing with idolatry in Isaiah, and it's,
mm,
it's a brilliant song for that sort of setting.
yes,
Um, or it might have been dealing with idolatry in 1 Corinthians, and just ideal for that sort of setting. But we hadn't
mm,
sung it for like a year and a half, and yet
yeah,
that's a great, I would say, contemporary song.
yeah,
My daughter says it has 6 sins that we've committed because you repeat the same thing in all 3 verses. But
yeah,
I think it's a great song, and I love it. And it really relates to people, who are turning from a very broken background
yes,
to come and find Christ for the first
yeah.
time. Yeah,
I think the two sins, aren't they, turning away from God and turning to idols?
they
That's the
are.
two.
They are. Yes,
But
but
I
by
know
the
what you
time you've
mean.
reached verse 3, it sounds like the fifth and sixth sins.
I can see that. Good. Well, we're almost out of time because we try and run these for about half an hour. So if you're
Yeah.
listening, we're nearly at the end, I promise. Um, any other sort of general observations that you're kind of seeing, things that
Yeah.
concern you or things that encourage you really? And just when you visit, I know you don't visit other churches that much, but what you
Not
hear
as
about.
much as I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So I think one of the things a few things we're very interested to see. The Gettys have just published the Sing hymnal.
yeah.
We're interested to see what the take up for that is, because we've kind of reached the conclusion that the days of hymnals is over. And so we're a bit surprised to see that when it came over here, it sold out. But,
Mhm.
is there a demand for that? It's very much more American. So, is there the need for something new here in Britain? That's something we're going to be sort of testing the market to see what people say. Um,
Yeah.
we are always wanting to find new writers,
Yeah.
and both of music and words.
Yeah.
And you don't have to write the two together. You could be just a wordsmith who we find a tune for.
Mhm.
So, but they need to be writers who are prepared to take criticism.
Mhm.
So if you start to write, you know that you're going to have to write 30 songs or hymns before you really are into form, as it were, and you've learned through the process. So we want to develop that, because we
Mhm.
we really need to find the next generation of hymn and songwriters here in Britain.
Yeah.
And there are lots of young adults coming out of university with a classical music training. We're finding some of those, and we want to find more. So do get in touch, if that's you.
Yeah.
I think I think we want to be focusing on congregational rather than performative
Yeah.
singing, because I think that's a danger. Our songs are getting longer and longer, aren't they? And it's almost like, they're like an aircraft that's stacking up over Windsor trying to come into Heathrow. It goes around and it goes around and it never quite comes into land. Um,
Mm.
the other thing is, are we writing again in another narrow band where
Yeah.
we have a lot of songs that focus on the love of Christ for us, shown in
Yes.
his death and his
Yeah.
resurrection, but they're all very sort of Easterish songs.
Hmm.
Who writes a song about Jesus feeding the 5,000?
Yeah.
Who writes a song about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead?
Hmm.
Who writes a song that is a lament in times of war? Because we certainly need that at the moment, don't we? Um,
Hmm.
who writes a song that is really, an intercessory song like Graham Kendrick's "Oh Lord, the clouds are gathering"? Are we
Yes.
writing songs like that now?
Yes.
And who writes a song about the church?
Yeah.
I think that's a very neglected theme. And what about some of the big salvation events like the Exodus? Um, Chris Idle's written an excellent hymn which we published called "Let My People Go,"
Mm.
which I recommend to anyone who's going to preach through Exodus. I think it's got a great tune and it's got some sensational words, but I guess most people have never discovered it. What about the exile? What about King David and that sort of period? What about Elijah? Does anybody write a hymn that you might use if you preached on one of these passages,
Mm. Yeah.
or in Acts? Who whoever based a hymn on on the Areopagus, for instance, but it's a
Well,
crucial
yeah,
passage.
yeah. And if well, more on the subject, if more about last things would be
Yes,
good,
yes, you
but
raised that
also
earlier.
about the Christian life,
Yes,
what you're putting to death, what you're putting on, what you're
yeah,
putting off,
yeah.
the family life, work life. There's some hymns that were kind of thought about how you then reflect that out in family life or work life, but
Yeah, I mean,
there's
Wesley
virtually no
wrote
contemporary ones.
"Forth in Thy name, O Lord, I
Quite.
go, my daily
Yes.
labour to pursue." Yeah,
Yes.
which was a great hymn, but and a real rarity in that sort of
Yes.
category.
Yeah.
So I think there are some. I mean, there's some very interesting hymns by Martin Leckebusch that have covered some of these themes, and he's a very thoughtful hymn writer, and you'll find a lot of his in our collection. Um, but I also wonder, what's the contemporary equivalent of Wesley's? I think it's Wesley. "O hidden source of calm repose."
Yeah.
Your sort
Yeah.
of intimate devotional hymns. Are we
Yeah.
afraid of being that open and heartfelt in what we
Yeah.
sing? I just wonder whether there's a missing emphasis there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think,
And
well, I mean, whether they get revived or whether they just need rewriting, but I mean, Isaac Watts was very good at making Psalms Christological.
yes.
Um, and there's not that many. Chris Idle did that a bit.
Yeah. David
Um,
Preston a bit. One or two of
yeah,
us. I mean, some of the versions that I wrote, I tried to. I wrote a version of Psalm 2 that was explicitly related to Christ's resurrection and eternal generation and so on. So, yeah,
yeah,
trying to make that Christological.
yeah,
And setting it to Jerusalem because I was so fed up with singing William Blake. But there you go.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
The other thing is, I think we have to teach a new generation to sing.
right,
Uh, we are so used to listening because music is, manufactured now.
yeah,
Um, who is actually used to live singing?
mm,
And if you go to church and the band is really loud, can you hear yourself sing?
mm,
That's an issue. So I do think, I mean, I love the fact that I think it was probably Mark Dever that started the trend. Um, you go to a big conference, FIC, for example, and Cornerstone will be leading worship, and we get to the
yeah,
final verse, and the musicians cut out, and we all
yes,
sing unaccompanied, and that is
yeah,
glorious to hear. We should do a bit more of that
yeah.
because
I
I
mean, we
think
did
there's a
something
place for that.
which you can't probably do in, well, you might be able to actually where you meet, but we meet in a school, and we ended up turning from portrait to landscape. uh,
What in
which
the hall? Yeah,
yeah, which
yeah,
meant we're basically sideways on, so shorter distance, but also people facing each other more in series of arcs
yeah,
rather than in rows all facing down one end. It's made a massive difference to the singing because, funnily
yeah,
enough, when people can hear each other singing more, they tend to sing back at each other.
yeah,
Whereas if they feel like they're kind of singing into a void, which
yeah,
particularly if you're not in a very acoustically friendly building, you tend to sing lower and lower because you hear yourself. If you can hear other people singing, you kind of go up to their level.
Yeah. And also a bit of reverb helps.
Mm,
We're in a hall with an acoustic tile ceiling. And it was only when we went away for our church away day into this old Methodist hall that really echoed that wow,
yeah,
the singing was amazing. The same
yeah,
number of people made 3 times the sound, so
yeah, indeed.
that's important. And that
Yeah,
encourages people to sing because
yeah,
the whole thing is louder and they can hide away in the sound of it, which I think is very important. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Brilliant. Well, really good to have you on. And
Thank you.
final reminder, praise.org.uk to find out more about uh, the um, the catalogue that you have there, which is
Yeah.
always growing and being added
And
to. And
this is
similarly,
this
go
is
on.
going out in March.
Yeah,
But if you happen to be discovering it in September, do look out for our Christmas Praise collection.
oh yeah,
We published a separate book of Christmas music, 71 items, and that is actually a book, a
nice.
spiral-bound music book. And most of that collection is now available. We can't get the rights to all of it, but most of it's online. So, yeah, you come to us for Christmas resources when that comes around, as it will all too quickly. Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you so much for listening to Affinity Talks Gospel podcast. Affinity is a network of evangelical churches and Christian organizations working together, sharing stories in order to encourage and equip God's people to preach and live the gospel in this generation. If you're interested in supporting this ministry, we'd love you to join us. Just head over to affinity.org.uk/join to find out more. And we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Affinity Talks Gospel.